What happens when Hollywood royalty meets actual royalty, and neither one wants to back down? You get one of the most jaw-dropping, painfully awkward late-night interviews in recent memory. Stephen Colbert's iconic set, usually buzzing with laughter and applause, suddenly feels more like a courtroom. On one side, the king of cool under pressure. On the other, Meghan Markle, the former duchess who's turned media interviews into battlegrounds. And tonight, she came ready for war. But before we break down every fiery moment of this televised collision, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Trust me, you're going to want to relive every second of this. The show began like any other. Colbert adjusted his tie, exchanged jokes with the crowd, and gave a knowing nod to the camera. He'd interviewed presidents, Oscar winners, even Elon Musk. But tonight felt different. His producers had warned him. Meghan had requests. Lighting angles, off-limit topics. Stephen just shrugged. He'd handled difficult guests before. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Meghan Markle. Applause. She glided onto the stage in a high, fashion ensemble worth more than most people's cars. Her smile was polished, poised, but something about it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you so much for having me, Stephen," she said, settling into the guest chair with practiced ease. Then, with a slight wrinkle of her nose, "Though I must say, your studio's much smaller than I imagined. We're practically on top of each other." Colbert blinked, eyebrows barely rising. "Well," he chuckled politely, "we like to keep it intimate. Makes for better conversation with the audience." Meghan smirked. "Wouldn't know about that. When you're used to addressing the UN having tea with world leaders, this does feel quaint." The crowd shifted. Something in the air changed. Colbert's smile didn't fade, but it stiffened. "Speaking of world leaders," he pivoted. "I understand you've launched some new initiatives since stepping back from royal duties." "Stepping back." Meghan cut in. Her voice now had an edge. "Let's not sugarcoat it. When the very institution that claims to be your family turns on you, because you have opinions, because you won't just smile and wave, you don't step back. You escape." A Colbert nodded slowly. "That must have been difficult." "You have no idea," she said, leaning in. "Do you know what it's like to be the most photographed woman on earth, and have people dissect how you hold your own baby?" Meanwhile, Catherine blinks and gets praised for it. Colbert cleared his throat. "I think we can all agree media scrutiny isn't easy for anyone in the spotlight." "Oh, please." Meghan scoffed. "You do a monologue, go home. You don't have ex-staff selling stories about you. You don't have an entire country's press trying to destroy you for falling in love with the wrong prince." "I've had my fair share of controversy," Colbert offered gently, but she was already steamrolling. "And another thing," she snapped. "Why is everyone obsessed with whether I curtsied right? I'm American. We fought a war so we wouldn't have to bow to anyone. Suddenly I marry Harry, and I'm expected to kneel like we're in medieval England." The room was silent. Even Colbert's producer was signaling frantically off camera. "I think what people admire about the royal family is the tradition and history they represent," Colbert tried. Meghan's eyes narrowed. "You mean racism. You mean the only person of color to marry into that family being treated like a threat." Her voice was rising now. "I tried to modernize that dusty institution, and they rejected me. Because they couldn't control me? I don't think it's fair to label the entire family." Stephen began. "Oh, so now you're defending them," she snapped. "How much did they pay you, Stephen?" A murmur swept the audience. "Because I know how it works," Meghan continued. "It's an invisible contract. Be nice to the firm, and they give you access. Say something critical, and suddenly your interviews dry up, but you get a Jubilee photo exclusive to make up for it." Stephen's jaw set. "No one pays me to have an opinion. Meghan, I'm just trying to have a conversation. A balanced conversation." She laughed coldly. There's no balance when it comes to truth. I saved Harry from a life of fake smiles and ribbon cuttings. I showed him what freedom and real love looked like, and they hated me for it. Some would say Harry seemed quite happy with his life of service before. Colbert offered carefully. Meghan scoffed. Service to what? A monarchy built on colonialism and privilege. Please. He was playing soldier and faking smiles for photo ops. I gave him purpose. And yet, Colbert interjected, you've both continued to use your titles. Her eyes flashed. Those titles are ours by right. Just because we refuse to be palace puppets doesn't mean we should forfeit what belongs to us. Harry is still a prince. I am still a duchess. No amount of royal spin changes that. Colbert exhaled slowly. His legendary calm was cracking at the edges. Look, he said, choosing his words like stepping through glass. You've clearly been through a lot, but surely you can understand why some people might see continuing to use royal titles while criticizing the institution as a bit contradictory. Meghan stared at him. The audience held its breath. Contradictory, she repeated softly. The temperature in the room dropped. She didn't yell. She didn't need to. She simply leaned forward, eyes locked on Colbert. You're just another man in a suit, trying to reduce my lived experience to a sound bite. But I won't be shamed for speaking the truth. Not by the palace, not by the press, not by you. And with that, the damage was done. Meghan's voice was sharp now, controlled, but laced with fire. You want to talk about contradictions? Stephen, let's talk. She leaned forward, each word deliberate. You sit there night after night, cracking jokes about power and privilege. But the second royalty walks into your studio, you start preaching about balance. That's the real contradiction. The air in the studio shifted. Colbert, usually animated and expressive, suddenly went still. His hands bowed together on the desk. I make jokes about people in power, he replied evenly, because they shape public policy and public lives. But I also try to treat my guests, any guest, with basic respect. Meghan let out a hollow laugh. Where was the respect when I was pregnant and the British press compared my baby to a chimpanzee? Where was the respect when I was mocked for holding my own belly? When they said loving me was the reason Harry was going bald? The audience tensed. Colbert opened his mouth to respond, but she didn't let him. Those were headlines, Stephen. Real ones? And the palace? Silent. Not one statement, not one word of defense. But they had time to release fluff about Kate's new dress, or which football match William attended. Colbert cleared his throat. Didn't the palace issue a few statements supporting you? Please. Meghan waved him off. Meanwhile, they were leaking to the tabloids behind my back. I found out about royal decisions that directly affected my life from newspapers, Stephen. The same press that tore me apart. That's not a family. That's PR warfare. Colbert tried to regroup. That does sound incredibly frustrating. Frustrating? Her voice pitched higher now. Frustrating doesn't even begin to cover it. I gave up my entire life. My home, my career, my freedom, for that family. And what did I get? Courtiers who hated that I had an opinion. Staff who quit because I expected them to actually do their jobs. A sister-in-law who made me cry. And yet somehow, I became the villain. Colbert shifted in his chair. Family dynamics can be complicated, he offered gently. No, Meghan said, cutting through him. They weren't complicated. They were calculated. They needed me to fail. Because if I succeeded, if I proved that you could be royal and still be real, still speak out, still fight, then the rest of them would have no excuse for decades of silence. Colbert glanced down at his cue cards, desperate for a pivot. Well, let's talk about your new ventures, he said, trying to inject some air into the room. You have a podcast. Had. Meghan corrected, quick and cold, until they decided my voice was too controversial. Apparently, discussing the labels that hold women back is too radical now. She leaned in again, unblinking. But that's always how it goes, isn't it? A woman speaks up. She's difficult. She asks for fairness. She's demanding. She refuses to be silenced. And suddenly, she's crazy. "I don't think anyone is calling you crazy," Colbert said softly. "They don't have to." Her voice dropped to a whisper, almost more dangerous than shouting. "They use words like emotional, attention-seeking, narcissistic. But they all mean the same thing, Stephen. They mean shut up. They mean a smile and wave. They mean, be grateful for your diamonds and your palace, and don't you dare make us uncomfortable." The audience wasn't just quiet now. They were locked in, frozen. A train wreck in slow motion. Colbert, usually master of the room, had gone eerily quiet, and Meghan, she wasn't finished. "You know what the worst part is," Meghan said, cutting off the silence before Stephen could speak. "I actually believed I could help." Her voice wasn't raised, but it carried. "I thought my background, my experience, my perspective could bring something new to the monarchy. Mental health, youth empowerment, real change. I had plans." She exhaled sharply, but every idea was dismissed. Too political, too American, too much. Change can be slow in traditional institutions, Colbert offered, gently. "Slow?" Meghan's voice cracked, her frustration pushing through. "Stephen, they're still debating whether women should wear pants to certain events. There are rules about which tiara you can wear based on your bloodline. I once got a memo, an actual memo, about the angle I should hold a teacup." She scoffed. The angle. Meanwhile, there are people sleeping outside the gates of the palace. "But surely," Stephen pressed, "there were some positive aspects to being a working royal." Meghan paused. Then she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "If you consider being treated like a zoo exhibit positive, then sure. Come see the American actress who trapped a prince. Watch her stumble through royal protocols designed to confuse and embarrass. Blame her for not following rules no one ever bothered to explain." "I doubt it was designed to humiliate you," Stephen said, though even he didn't sound convinced. "Wasn't it?" Meghan shot back. "Tell me, what exactly is the purpose of a curtsy in the 21st century? Why should someone walk behind another person because of the order in which they were born?" She leaned forward. "What do you call a system that says my son, my beautiful son, wasn't prince enough because of the color of his skin?" The room fell dead silent. "No, wait a minute," Stephen said, his tone firmer. "The palace claimed that was based on protocol, not race." "The palace says a lot of things," Meghan replied coldly. "They said they'd protect us. They said they'd support us. They said family came first." She looked him dead in the eye. "How did that work out?" Stephen shifted, visibly uncomfortable now. "I think what viewers might be wondering is, if it was all so terrible, why did you and Harry stay so long?" "Because we're not quitters," Meghan answered instantly. "Because Harry loves his family, and I love Harry. We thought love would be enough. But you can't love someone out of their prejudice. You can't hug away centuries of dysfunction. And you definitely can't modernize a system that sees your very existence as a threat." "Some would argue," Stephen said, more carefully now, "that you've continued to benefit from your royal connection." Meghan's voice dropped to a dangerous hush. "You think this is about money? You think we gave up our security, our home, our relationships, for a check?" Oh, she leaned in, every syllable carved in ice. "We had to earn money because they cut us off, because they pulled our security while the death threats were still coming. Because apparently, protecting the spare only matters when he's dancing to the palace's tune." Stephen's fingers tapped nervously on his desk. A familiar tell to anyone who watched him regularly. "Look," he said, "I know you've been through difficult experiences, but surely you understand how continuing to criticize the royal family while still using your Duchess title might strike people as well. Hypocritical." Meghan laughed, but there was no humor in it. There's that word again. Hypocritical. She leaned forward like she was pressing her finger against a bruise. You want to know what's hypocritical? A family that preaches duty while covering up sex scandals. A press that pretends to care about mental health while driving people to the brink. A public that screams for authenticity, then punishes anyone who dares to be real. But this isn't just being real. Stephen pushed back, his voice sharper now. You're making serious accusations against people who aren't here to defend themselves. Can't or won't. Meghan shot back. Because they have an army. PR secretaries, communications teams, sources who plant stories in the press. What do I have? She placed a hand over her chest. I have my voice, my truth. And apparently, that's too much for the world to handle. The air in the room was thick. Even the band leader, usually unflappable, stared down at his shoes. Your truth, Stephen repeated slowly, testing the phrase. But isn't truth supposed to be objective? Isn't there a difference between your perspective and actual facts? Meghan's face went still. Her voice was a whisper, but it cut like a blade. Are you calling me a liar? Meghan's eyes narrowed, her voice tight with fury. Multiple sides. She let out a dry, bitter laugh. What's the other side to racism, Stephen? What's the other side to being suicidal while pregnant and being told to keep quiet because it might look bad for the institution? What's the other side to your own family feeding stories to the press to destroy you? Colbert's expression hardened slightly. Maybe the other side, he said carefully, is that running a 1,000-year-old institution is complicated. Maybe decisions are made for reasons you don't fully understand. And maybe, just maybe, not everything is about you. Meghan stood. Her heels struck the studio floor like gunshots. Not everything is about me, she snapped. That's rich coming from a man who talks about himself for a living. At least I'm fighting for something. At least I'm trying to expose injustice. Sit down, Stephen said quietly, but there was steel in his voice. Meghan froze. Excuse me, I said. Sit down. His tone didn't rise, but the weight behind it was undeniable. You agreed to a conversation. What you're doing right now, it's not a conversation. It's a performative tantrum. The audience gasped. Meghan's face flushed red. How dare you? No, Stephen cut her off. How dare you? You come on my show. You insult the studio. You belittle my work. You accuse people who aren't here to defend themselves. And then you act surprised when someone finally challenges you. I'm telling my truth. Meghan shot back, though her voice was starting to wobble. Your truth seems to shift depending on the platform and the paycheck, Stephen replied coldly. Your truth comes with book deals, Netflix specials, and carefully curated interviews where no one pushes back. He stepped out from behind the desk now. Your truth always makes you the victim. While you live in a mansion, while you sign $1 million deals, while you wear jewelry that could pay for a family's food for a year. Meghan's voice softened, a crack of vulnerability slipping through. You don't understand what I've been through. Stephen didn't flinch. You're right. I don't. But I understand privilege. And sitting here, listening to you complain about how hard your life is while talking about your multiple homes, your production company, and your speaking fees, while claiming to be silenced. It's insulting to people who actually face oppression. I never said I was oppressed, Meghan whispered. You didn't have to, Stephen replied. You've implied it for 20 minutes. Every story is about how unfairly you were treated, about how no one understood you, about how the entire British establishment conspired to ruin you. At what point, he continued, do you take responsibility for any of it? Responsibility for what? She snapped. For falling in love, for wanting to be treated with dignity, for refusing to be silent while they tried to erase me. For the staff members who quit, Stephen said. For the family ties that fractured. For the smear campaigns you launched. for the endless public attacks on people who welcomed you into their lives. He paused. For the hypocrisy of demanding privacy while sitting down for tell-all interviews. For the first time, Meghan was silent. The entire studio had gone still. You could hear the studio lights humming. Stephen's voice dropped. It was calm, unforgiving. Here's what I think happened. You walked into the palace with expectations, when reality didn't match them. Instead of adapting, or even compromising, you decided you were right and they were wrong. And when they wouldn't play your game, you burned the whole thing down. He paused. And now you're standing in the ashes, blaming everyone else for lighting the match. That's not fair, Meghan said weakly. Isn't it? He asked. You paint the royal family like they're monsters. But Harry was close to his brother his whole life, until you. He adored his grandparents, until suddenly they were symbols of oppression. He was proud of his service, until that, too, became a burden. Stephen stepped closer. What changed? He asked point blank. Was it them, or was it you? Meghan's voice cracked. I opened his eyes. Or maybe, Stephen said evenly, you closed them. Maybe you isolated him. Maybe you convinced him that the only truth that mattered was yours. Meghan turned away. This interview is over. She began removing her microphone. I think you're right, Stephen said. But before you go, he looked her dead in the eye. You came here to promote a project, to tell your story. Instead, you've spent the entire interview attacking others. At some point, you might want to ask yourself why the same pattern keeps happening. He paused. Let it hang. If everyone around you is supposedly toxic, maybe the common denominator isn't them. Meghan stood, fully unhooked from the mic. I expected better from you, she said coldly. I thought you were different. Stephen didn't blink. I am different. I'm honest. And honestly, Meghan, you need to take a long, hard look in the mirror and ask yourself if the person staring back at you is really the hero of this story. Without another word, Meghan walked off the set. Her heels echoed in the silence. No applause, no outro music, just the sound of departure. Stephen sat back down, straightened his tie, and looked straight into the camera. Well, he said dryly, that was something. We'll be right back. The band struck up the transition music as the show cut to commercial. But the audience didn't move. They just stared, stunned. In all his years behind the desk, Stephen Colbert had never ended an interview like that. As the lights dimmed and the ad break rolled, Stephen quietly removed his mic and walked off stage, leaving a shaken studio in his wake. The Duchess had finally met someone who didn't play along with the narrative. And the result was seismic. What do you think? Was Stephen right to hold her accountable, or did he cross the line? Let us know in the comments below.